Hey, today I would like to show you how to shoot a time-lapse with the time-lapse mode with the Canon 90D and the Canon M50 after the intro. What's up guys, the Emperor here and welcome back to another video. If you're new to this channel, consider subscribing, and since you're there, hit the like button. Okay, so now we jump immediately into the topic of today's video, how to shoot a time-lapse with the Canon 90D and the Canon M50 in time-lapse mode. But first of all, what's a time-lapse and why do we need it? When do we use it in our videos? A time-lapse, it's many photos or captures shot at a certain interval, one every 2 seconds, one every 3 seconds, and so on, and then stitched together into a video. And the final result would look as a very fast moving scene that can show crowds of people walking, clouds moving, the weather changing, and so on. And it gives the idea of time passing by. When do we need it in our videos? A time-lapse is generally used in two different ways. One is, of course, to give the idea of time passing by. So it could be used as a transition when you're filming and you're going from one place to another. You can use it as a transition both in time and space. And also can be used to establish your scene. Like for example, I usually do that when I shoot my videos here at home and I shoot a time-lapse of what's going on like here outside, to give you the idea that this is what I see from the window, this is what happens around me, and the scene will be taking place like here from this point of view. So now let's see the buttons we have to press to be able to shoot a time-lapse in time-lapse mode with the Canon M50 first, and then we'll see with the 90D. There are quite a few differences, just maybe not many, but there are. So make sure you're in video mode and then you press the menu button, scroll down to time-lapse mode, which is disabled by default. To enable it, you have to choose one of the scenes. Number one, for shooting moving subjects, such as walking people. The second, for shooting slowly changing subjects, such as clouds, for example. The number three, for shooting slowly changing scenes, like it could be sunrise, sunset, something like that. But let's see scene number one. So we can select the interval between one shot and the other. In this case, I want to select 2 seconds. It's not going to go too slow, it's not going to go too fast. I kind of like it. For 300 shots, and it's gonna take 9 minutes and 58 seconds to get a 10 seconds time lapse. We click OK. We shoot in 4K, then auto exposure. Well, you have two options. One is fixed the first frame, you expose correctly the first frame, and then that's gonna be the exposure for the rest of the time lapse. All shots will be shot with the same exposure as the first frame. And the second one, auto exposure for each frame. I recommend using the first option. Trust me, you don't want your camera to auto expose every single shot of the time lapse, because if something changes every now and then in the weather or in the lights, it would just look weird or not good in my opinion. So I set it to first option, fixed first frame, auto screen off. Yeah, of course, if you don't want your screen to be on the entire time. So you're all set. You go back to menu, menu again, and here with the camera, what we need to control to get the time lapse the way that we want, the way we like it, with the aperture and the shutter speed. During the day, I believe you're not gonna need to change your ISO, so keep it at 100. What you need to control in this case is the aperture and the shutter speed. If there's much light, you don't really need a blurry background or something like that, because it's a landscape or a scene in the distance. Let's say you're not gonna need a blurry background, so you don't need a shallow depth of field. Usually there is much light outside, so you can set it to f8, f12, 16, and so on. It's not a problem in this case. And the shutter speed, to my surprise, with the Canon M50, the shutter speed doesn't go, when shooting a time lapse, slower than 1/30th of a second. Why is that important? Why would it be good to have the possibility to set it slower? For two reasons. One is the motion blur. And you know, when you set a lower shutter speed, you get more motion blur, which in a time lapse looks so good and cinematic, but you're not gonna get much with the M50. And also, because the shutter speed controls the amount of time that the sensor is exposed to light, so the brightness. If you're shooting at night, you're not gonna get much extra light through the shutter speed at 1/30th of a second. But okay, today we're shooting in the sun, so it's not gonna be a problem, just we're not gonna get much motion blur with the M50. So once you're happy with the settings, you just press the rec button and there you go. Then you wait and you have your time lapse. Oh. 90 degrees at 8 a.m. That's crazy. Now we're gonna do the same with the Canon 90D. So you go to menu, you scroll down till you find the time lapse. To enable it, you choose the scenes. I use the same settings, of course in 4K, one shot every 2 seconds, but you can set it to 3 or more depending on the results that you want, but it depends what you're shooting. In this case, for people, it's good from 2 to 3 seconds, something like that. Then the auto exposure, first option, like first frame only, is going to be better in my opinion. And then we go to see, in this case, after we adjust the aperture, we don't touch the ISO, we go to see the shutter speed. And here we find a big difference. Unlike the M50, that when you want to lower and slower down the shutter speed, you find out that you can't more than 1/30th of a second when shooting in time-lapse mode. With the 90D, you can go farther down, and that's a very good thing. Therefore, if we're going to select a slower shutter speed, there will be so much light. The time-lapse would be so bright. For sure, if we shoot a time-lapse during the day with a slower shutter speed, we're gonna need ND filters. With an ND filter, we can keep the shutter speed very slow, and even the aperture, it depends on the ND filter you're using, if it's an ND2, ND4, ND8, ND10 and so on. It depends on the amount of light that the ND filter will be able to block. So that's the only way we can set the aperture the way that we want and the shutter speed the way that we need to get the cinematic look, motion blur that we actually need for the time lapse. Let's say you're not gonna need a blurry background, so you don't need a shallow depth of field. So you can set it to f8, f12, 16 and so on. As you have seen, that's not difficult at all. Just depending on which camera you're using. For these time lapses, I use the 10 to 18 millimeters, so a wide angle lens, because there isn't much distance between me and the scene. So if I use like a 24 millimeters or a 50 millimeters, I would have been able to frame only maybe the cafe with the tables. But to shoot the entire scene, the 10 to 18 millimeters was great. And also, I like to shoot wide scenes when it comes to time lapses, because if I don't have a slider, I can simulate movement in the time lapse by cropping the video in post in many different ways, but that would be the topic of a different video. So to wrap it up, what do you need to shoot a time lapse with the 90D or with the M50? Well, first of all, you need the camera, one of those, but any other camera will do. Just you're gonna need a tripod. Any lens is good. I mean, I suggest a wide-angle lens if there isn't much distance between you and the scene, and ND filters. The more I shoot, the more I realize the importance of using ND filters, especially outdoors and during the day. So what's basically the difference between shooting a time-lapse with the M50 and with the 90D? Well, that's basically the ability of the 90D to slower down the shutter speed much more than when you're using the M50, and that gives you more flexibility. It gives you the possibility to slow it down so that you can get that motion blur that looks so cinematic in the video, and also it gives you the ability to shoot great time lapses at night. First, you get the motion blur, but second, and sometimes even more important, you get much more light. If you want to check out these cameras and their prices and also of all the gear I talk about, you can see the links in the description. Alright, so I guess that's it for today. I really hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, smash the like button, subscribe if you ain't already, and I will see you guys in the next video.